Assalamu alaikum guys. Make sure you don't buy this type of car. Most commentators on this topic agree that there are two major themes that virtually all car makers will have to include in their new cars if they want to stay alive. And those two major themes are one, electrification, and two, autonomy. Let's start with electrification. Cars are becoming electric. Now, depending on which source you look at, you'll get different forecasts for how fast the share of electric vehicles will grow as compared to the overall vehicle market. But what we know for sure is that over the last 5 years, it has grown at an average rate of 60% every year worldwide. If you look at a country like China, for example, they're aiming for sales of new electric vehicles to constitute around 25% of all sales of new vehicles by the year 2025. If you look at a country like Norway, in 2019, 55% of all new car sales were electric vehicles. So the trend to moving to electric vehicles is rather clear worldwide. Now, if you look at the average time that people keep their cars for, it's around 6 years. So now the question becomes, if you buy a new car today that's not electric, what are the chances that you're going to get a good price for it in 6 years? It's hard to forecast what the demand for non-electric vehicles is going to be in 6 years, and it's going to vary depending on where you are. However, I would suspect that it's not going to be favorable at all for the seller. Now, you may be asking, well, aren't electric vehicles really expensive? And while the starting price of electric vehicles tends to be higher than internal combustion engine vehicles, the lower cost of ownership that electric vehicles have tends to make up for the difference pretty quickly. A 2018 study from the University of Michigan, go Bucks by the way, found that the cost of ownership for electric vehicles was less than half the cost of ownership of a non-electric vehicle. So in the United States, the cost of ownership for an electric vehicle per year was around $485, whereas the cost of ownership for a non-electric vehicle was around $1,100. Another study done by Loop Ventures found that the cost per mile over a 5-year period for the Tesla Model 3 was actually lower than the cost per mile for an Audi A5, and it was lower than the cost per mile for a Toyota Camry, despite the higher starting price for the Tesla Model 3 compared to the Camry. So from a cost perspective, if you're in the market to buy a new sedan and you can buy a Tesla Model 3, to me, this seems like a no-brainer since the cost per mile over a 5-year period is actually less than the cost per mile for even a Toyota Camry. So that's the first part of my recommendation, and that is if you're going to buy a new car and you can buy an electric car, then I think financial prudency suggests that you should buy an electric car because 6 years from now, I'm really not sure what type of resale value or resale market there's going to be for non-electric vehicles. And when you look at the cost per mile, as we showed, it turns out that electric vehicles can make a very compelling case. The second consideration that I think is important to take into account if you're in the market for buying a new car is, can this new car that you're buying become fully autonomous? Since 2019, all new Teslas are being fitted with full self-driving computers. And I don't think any other car manufacturer is doing this, which means that the only cars right now that have the hardware to become fully autonomous are Teslas. Now, as with electrification, it's hard to tell how ubiquitous autonomous vehicles will be in 5 or 6 years. I think that many may be underestimating the amount of demand that may be for full self-driving vehicles, especially considering the enhanced safety that full self-driving will offer the occupants of a vehicle. So it's not inconceivable in my mind that the cost of a Tesla may not just only maintain, but may actually appreciate in 5 or 6 years, because there's going to be so much demand for them and there aren't enough cars to meet that demand. Another wrinkle to add to this picture is if Tesla actually implemented the Robotaxi network that it was talking about, wherein you could have your car connected to this Robotaxi network, and this network would basically be an Uber-like service wherein people who needed a ride could hail a close Tesla and use it to go to their destination, and you could actually make money off of the Tesla you owned by including it in the Tesla Robotaxi network.
So any customer will be able to add or remove their car to the Tesla network. So we expect this to operate it's sort of like a combination of maybe the Uber and Airbnb model. So if you own the car, you can add or subtract it to the Tesla network, and Tesla would take 25 or 30% of the revenue. And then in places where there aren't enough people sharing their cars, we would just have dedicated Tesla vehicles. Like typically the use of a car is about 10 to 12 hours a week. So most people will drive 1.5 to 2 hours a day, typically 10 to 12 hours a week of total driving. But if you have a car that can operate autonomously, then most likely you'd have that car operate for a third of the week or longer. So there are 168 hours in a week, so probably you've got something on the order of 55 to 60 hours a week of operation, maybe a bit longer. So the fundamental utility of a vehicle increases by a factor of 5. So the current cost of a Model 3 Robotaxi is less than $38,000. We expect that number to improve over time. And we're designing the cars. The cars currently being built are all designed for 1 million miles of operation. So the drive units are designed and tested and validated for 1 million miles of operation. The current battery pack is about maybe 300 to 500,000 miles. The new battery pack that probably go into production next year is designed explicitly for 1 million miles of operation. The entire vehicle, battery pack inclusive, is designed to operate for 1 million miles with minimal maintenance. So we'll actually be adjusting tire design and really optimizing the car for a hyper-efficient robotaxi. And at some point, you won't need steering wheels or pedals, and we'll just delete those. So as these things become less and less important, we'll just delete parts. They won't be there. If you say like probably 2 years from now, we make a car that has no steering wheels or pedals. Yeah, probably say long term, 3 years, robotaxis with eliminated parts. Maybe it ends up being $25,000 or less.
So the conclusion here is that if you're in the market for a new car, I think it makes a lot of sense for you to consider buying an electric car that has the hardware that it needs to become fully autonomous. Because I do think that these changes are going to become more and more pronounced in the near future. And you don't want to sink tens of thousands of dollars into a new car and then 5 or 6 years from now be in the position of someone who was selling a horse during the transition to automobiles. You have this internal combustion engine car that is manually driven and cannot become autonomous, and you take a really big hit in its resale value. Right now, the only car manufacturer that is producing cars that meet these two criteria, as far as I know, is Tesla. This may change in the near future, and if it does, then you should consider whatever options that you have. Now, if you're not in a position to buy an electric car that has the hardware for full autonomy, then I would go ahead and buy a used car rather than a new car and try and save up and wait till I have the option to buy a new car that has the electric and fully autonomous criteria that I mentioned. By the way, I think it's important to mention here that I'm not sponsored by Tesla. I don't work for them. I do own some shares in the company. If you need halal funding to buy a Tesla or anything else, and you live in the United States, go to fundmebff.com. If you're looking for a halal investment and you earn at least $200,000 annually, then go to fundmebff.com and apply to become an investor. If you liked anything in this video or found it beneficial, leave a like, it really helps. Subscribe for more content. Until next time, take care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all.